In the summer of 1194, a fire tore through a quiet French town and left almost nothing standing. Homes collapsed, streets vanished under ash, and at the center of it all, a cathedral was presumed lost. But when the smoke finally cleared days later, something strange remained. Inside the ruins, a fragile cloth, believed to be sacred, was found completely untouched. No better marks, no damage. For the people who witnessed it, this wasn't just survival. It was a message. And what they built next wasn't simply a replacement. It was something far more deliberate. The new structure that rose from those ashes would go on to puzzle modern researchers centuries later. Because when people step inside certain Gothic cathedrals, something unusual happens. Their breathing slows. Their thoughts become quieter. Their bodies seem to settle into a calmer rhythm. At first, it's easy to attribute that to faith or atmosphere. But that explanation starts to fall apart when you look closer. Because the reaction isn't just emotional. It's physical, measurable, and that changes everything. Modern acoustic studies have revealed that some of these massive stone structures don't treat sound evenly. Instead, they amplify very specific low-frequency ranges, frequencies so deep they are often felt more than heard. These same frequencies are associated with brainwave states linked to deep relaxation and reduced stress. In other words, the building itself is influencing the nervous system, not symbolically, directly. And that raises a question most people never think to ask. Was that intentional? The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to dismiss. Because these cathedrals weren't just built by random labor. They were constructed by highly organized guilds, groups of craftsmen who spent years mastering geometry, materials, sound behavior, and light. Their knowledge wasn't written down in full. It was passed from person to person through long apprenticeships, which means much of what they understood never made it into recorded history. And yet, the evidence of that knowledge still stands in stone. Take the architecture itself. The towering arches and external supports weren't just aesthetic choices. They shape how sound moves through the space, how it reflects, how it lingers. The layout of the interior creates patterns that interact with the human body in subtle ways. Then there's the stained glass. Often described as storytelling tools, these windows do something else entirely. They filter sunlight into specific wavelengths. Different colors, created through mineral-based pigments, alter the quality of light entering the space. Today we know that light can influence hormones, mood, and biological rhythms. Back then, they didn't have scientific instruments, but they had observation, generations of it. And when you combine sound, light, and structure, something interesting happens. The space becomes more than just a building. It becomes an environment, one that produces a consistent effect on the people inside it. That effect isn't random. It's repeatable, and that suggests design. Not accidental design, but refined, intentional design built on centuries of trial and error. But if that's true, then something doesn't add up. Because we don't build like this anymore. We have more advanced technology than ever before. We can analyze sound frequencies, measure light spectra, simulate structures with software. And yet, we don't create spaces that consistently produce these same effects. Which leads to a bigger question. What happened to the knowledge that made this possible? To find the answer, you have to look at what changed in society. During the 16th century, major shifts began to take place across Europe. Monasteries were dismantled, their lands taken, their systems broken apart. These weren't just religious centers. They were hubs of care. They housed the sick, cultivated medicinal plants, and maintained systems that supported entire communities. When they disappeared, that infrastructure collapsed almost overnight. At the same time, the guilds that built these cathedrals were also being weakened. Laws began to restrict their operations. Economic systems shifted toward wage labor. Knowledge that had once been shared within tight-knit groups started to fragment. Skills that required decades to master were no longer passed down in the same way. And as those systems faded, something else took their place. Industrialization. With it came a different way of thinking. Buildings became practical, efficient, cost-driven. The idea that a structure could influence the human body wasn't part of the equation anymore. Over time, the deeper understanding behind cathedral design began to disappear from the narrative. What remained was the surface-level explanation: religion, art, symbolism. The measurable effects were either ignored or never fully understood. But traces of the old knowledge still exist. Practices like burning incense, used for centuries in these spaces, have been shown to release compounds that affect the nervous system, reducing anxiety and altering perception. Combined with the acoustics and lighting, these elements suggest a layered environment, one where multiple factors work together to produce a specific outcome. And that brings us back to the present. Today, researchers can measure what happens inside these structures. They can confirm the effects, but they can't fully replicate them. Because what was lost wasn't just information. It was a system, a way of learning, refining, and passing down knowledge over generations. Once that system disappeared, so did the ability to recreate what it produced. So when you stand inside one of these cathedrals today, you're not just experiencing history. You're stepping into something we no longer know how to build. A space where sound, light, and structure come together in a way that subtly alters the human body. And the unsettling part is this: we can prove it works. We just don't fully understand how it was done. Which leaves one final question. Was this knowledge simply lost over time? Or was it left behind on purpose? What if everything you just heard is only a fragment of a much bigger hidden history, and the rest is still out there waiting to be uncovered? If this changed the way you see the world, hit subscribe now, because the next story goes even deeper. Share this with someone who questions everything. And drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think about this.